Today's video is sponsored by myself and my webshop hsMVY.shop. Please go check it out. The new website is now live and we're constantly adding new products to get you a better shopping experience and the best possible tools and materials for your hobby needs. This video was made possible thanks to the kind folks over at Creality. I was not paid to say or do anything, however they did give me free items for use in this video to show you guys how they work and what is possible with them. Those items include the Resin 3D printer, the Mage S, also the UW3, the wash and cure system, and 2 bottles of resin. If you are interested in checking these items out, I will be leaving links in the description down below to the Creality website. Also, for more information and details on the printers and the other items, please do check out everything on the website. I can bore you with it, but I will not, as I don't know enough about it, but just barely, so that I can get my way around it and not really be the one to advise anyone. I really did like the printer. It worked really well for me in this video, but that's pretty much all I have to say about it. So thank you very much, Creality, for sending out all these items. Now on to the project. As you probably already understood by reading the title of this video, I will be showing you how to 3D print a model kit in very loose terms. On Cults 3D, I found some files of a Alpine A110. This was specifically designed as a 1/24th scale model kit designed by 3DVM. If you are interested in checking out his files and designs, I will leave a link in the description down to his page on Cults 3D. I bought the files myself. I'm not affiliated with the designer whatsoever, and he does not know that I'm making this video. But if you are interested after seeing what I did here, do check them out, of course. So for the files, I bought the ones for the Alpine A110 model kit, also an upgraded spoiler and wheel set to fit my desires for a certain design a little bit better. With this being a print-at-home 3D model set and not an actual model kit, it is lacking in certain things and requires a lot of things to be made yourself or are made a little bit harder than they are when just buying a regular model kit. That includes decals and, of course, clear parts. Now, luckily, this designer has also made a design file set available. These are not decals by themselves, but these are the designs for the decals that fit the kit that you can have printed at your own decal printer or maybe even print them at home. So if you get those printed, then you could also decide to have some clear parts made too, but in this case that might be a little bit harder. These cannot really be printed on 3D printers. Yes, there is clear resin, but that isn't really up to the task on clear parts this big and don't really have the transparency. So what the designer has done, he has made some 3D bucks, so to speak, so you can vacuum form your own parts. Now, I do not yet have a vacuum forming machine. I am very interested in getting one. They are relatively affordable, so if you know of any ones that you've used yourself or highly recommend, please do let me know down in the comments below, as I am on the lookout to get a vacuum forming machine to create some of my own clear parts for these builds. Now, not only those parts are in the designs, of course, you have the rest of the model kit too. The wheels, the interior, the exterior, everything. It comes as pre-supported files and also just the files without supports, so if you want to, you can add your own supports or just use the pre-supported ones. That saves you a ton of time. Now, these supports are pretty much here to hold the parts to the build plate or the printer itself. If you want to get in more detail, then there are many videos on adding supports, etc. on YouTube, and also a couple older videos on my own channel if you want to know more about that specifically. Now, in this case, I decided to use the pre-supported ones as the supports were in the locations they needed to be, and it worked for him, and in this case also worked for me on this printer as well. So all of the files were loaded into Chidu Box. I set the layer height at 0.02. You can also go to 0.01 to make the layer height even thinner. It does take twice as long, of course, as there are twice as many layers to print, but that is all up to your own preference. In this case, I decided to go with 0.02, as this is just an example piece and not a show piece, requiring a lot more finer details and parts to be printed. After the printing process has been completed, all of the parts are still covered in uncured resin. Now, the way that this works is that the resin printer cures a part of the resin, but the resin parts that are printed are still fully covered in the excess resin that is not cured during the printing process, as it is basically dunked in and out of that printing resin bath many times until the part has been completed printing, but that does leave it fully enclosed in resin that still needs to be removed. Now you can leave the parts to hang on the machine for a period of time that will drip off eventually, but not all of it. So what I do is a pre-rinse in some dirty used alcohol, which will then get rid of most of the excess resin, not all of it, but that does mean that the final cleaning step that I use will keep the cleaning solution cleaner, as most of the dirtiness is already removed in that pre-rinse, if you know what I mean. If not, do let me know in the comments and I can explain a little bit better. But basically I'm dunking the parts in two different baths, one for the first dirty stage and then a second one for the final cleaning stage. And this will then prolong the life of the, so to speak, cleaning solution a lot longer, and the dirty one still works but doesn't clean it as good as you want it to, but does help keep the cleaning solution cleaner at the second and final stage, which gets you cleaner and nicer parts in the end. That final cleaning stage is done on the UW3 from Creality, which is the washing and curing station. In this case, it is turned into the washing station with some alcohol into the container that cleans off all of the resin. With that completed, I take all of the parts out, let them dry nicely so that all of the alcohol evaporates. The parts are clean and dry, but not yet fully cured. And at this stage, I start to remove all of the supports. Now, these supports are not meant to be on the final product, so they need to be removed. Now, you can also leave these on and cure the parts. However, from my own personal experience, once parts are fully cured, including the supports, they are really hard, really tough to remove. And they tend to break, snap, and damage a lot of the parts a lot more than if you do it before final cure. Now, during the printing process, the parts are semi-cured. You still need to clean them up as I've just done and then do a final cure. But in the meantime, I'm removing these supports, as this is the easiest time during this parts making process for me to remove those supports, as they are semi-cured, still a little bit more flexible and can easily be cut off or snapped off. Now you can also use a little bit of heat, as I've just shown. That makes the parts a lot more pliable, and all of these supports pretty much peel off really easily. And on some delicate parts, you can decide to just cut them off with a flush cut cutter or some other tools that you might like to use. To put the printer through its paces, I have decided to test multiple parts at different layer heights, also to show you a bit better of an example of how the parts come out. Now, from afar, both parts look pretty much identical, but up close you can very clearly see a lot of lines on both of the parts. Some are thicker, some are thinner. On the part on the right hand side, I used a 0.05 layer height, and on the left hand side I used a 0.02. Now, the thinner the layer, the more layer lines, but the thinner the layers themselves, meaning a cleaner part, crisper details, and a lot less time spent sanding all of those layer lines off. But that is all up to your personal preference, and also depends on the type of part that you are printing. In this case, with these highly detailed parts and pieces, I like to have the layer height as thin as possible. It does take a lot longer to print, but in any case, all of the parts come out a lot more detailed, a lot cleaner, crisper, and need less time afterwards to be sanded. So as you've probably figured out by now, I'm going to go for the body that was shown on the left side. That was the 0.02 with the finer layer lines, meaning less time sanding. Now this is just a quick build mock-up. I'm painting these parts very bare bones, not going into a lot of detail and or preparation time to clean up the parts as best as possible, as you're used to in my regular builds. So there are a ton of layer lines, artifacts from the printing, etc. still to be shown, but just with a little bit of basic preparations, you can already see the high quality of parts coming out of the printer that don't really require a lot of cleanup. Now you can go as far as you want, but in this case I decided not to, just to show the parts coming out of the printer and minimal effort being put into it, what you are able to get out of it. So after just a little bit of sanding, a couple light coats of primer, the parts are pretty much ready to go already onto the next stage, and that is in this case color. Now again, like I said, this is not one of my regular builds. This is basically just a showcase of what these printers these days are already capable of, with parts coming pretty much straight off of the printer onto your workbench into the spray booth. For the exterior, I applied a couple of metallic black coats, and on most of the other parts I decided to go with a flat black, some yellow, some silver, and also some saddle tan highlights for the interior. Now again, everything very bare bones, just giving it a little bit of color, a little bit of more life than just having the gray resin printed parts, just to show up during the building itself, that it can look a little better than just a bunch of gray parts put together, which might also look cool as some sort of prototype build, but I wanted to give it a bit more life. As far as the assembly of this kit goes, it's pretty bare bones as well. It doesn't have a ton of parts, but enough parts and enough detail to make it into a very convincing build. Now the lovely thing about this being a 3D printed part, if you break a part or if you want to change a part, you can simply print a new one. And if you are handy enough with the computer and 3D designing, you can even alter parts and create or add more details to them, or even change the shape entirely to your own desires. Now all of these have been painted, and I will just assemble them with a little bit of glue as a showcase of this specific design set and the capability of the printers, and using a very bare bones approach, as I've mentioned too many times in this video already. So excuse the quality. This is not the regular quality of build that I do on my channel and builds. This is a showcase of the printer and the files in this case. Now I do want to quickly mention that if you guys like this type of build and want to see one done in full detail, which I personally do, then do let me know down in the comments, as I'm highly tempted to print another one of these kits and build one in a lot higher quality to see if I can get it up to regular model kit standards with a bit more effort and the style of build that you're kind of used to on my channel. Nonetheless, all of the details as shown on these close-ups are really nice and crisp, and most of the parts came out of the printer pretty much perfectly with no sanding required whatsoever. Now there are still a couple of pit holes, pinholes, some puck marks, etc. from all of the supports being removed, and not all of the parts have been prepped, as you could have seen in the video and that I've mentioned a lot of times. Nonetheless, I'm really impressed with the printer, the capabilities, and also the designs that have become available through the years for 3D printing model kits and adding accessories to your current builds.